Hi, and welcome to the Improvisers podcast. I'm Neil Thomas, and this is my co-host, Kevin Janes.
Thank you, Neil. On the Improvisers podcast, we chat with performers about their histories, their practices, their conceptualizations around practice, their enthusiasms and aspirations. Who have we got on today, Neil?
Today it gives us great pleasure to be in conversation with Neil Thomas. We've had a great deal of difficulty dragging him to the plate, but finally we have the opportunity to hear what he has to say. And I've got to say, Kevin, I'm relishing it. I'm going to grill him and get down to some brass tacks.
Be a little careful with him, Neil. It's taken a lot of coaxing to bring him on. I told him I would support him if you grilled him too seriously. So I just want to ask you to be careful, be kind, and let's go.
Great.
7?
That's good. I think that's good, Mr. Neil Thomas. And me going, where is he?
Welcome, welcome, Mr. Neil Thomas, to the Improvisers podcast. It's so good to have the opportunity to chat to you. You'll be our 53rd guest on the series. I would have liked to have had you on much earlier, but my co-host was reluctant, but finally has conceded and agreed that you're a very important person to interview. So, Neil, good morning and welcome to the Improvisers podcast.
Right. Thanks. Thanks for inviting me, Kevin. I've been enjoying the podcast so far. Loved it. It's congratulations. It's such a great project. And I have been feeling a little bit, left out, I suppose, and wondering why I haven't been invited earlier. But it's good to finally be here and to acknowledge all the guests before me and what a tricky thing it is to do. A confronting thing to do, a challenging thing to do. So maybe that's why your co-host was reluctant to get me on. He thought perhaps that I wasn't up to the job. But hey, we'll see what we can do.
What I'm going to do is take on my co-host role for a moment. He usually asks the very first question, and I'll do my best to ask a very similar question. Neil, tell us about improvisation in your performance life. When did it start? How has it evolved? And I guess, where are you at now? How's that for a question?
Oh, that's a big one. And I do resist. I do resist looking back, Kevin, I have to say. So I'll do my best. I was a very shy, introverted. I'd say I still am shy and introverted. And I went through life at university life and academic life and was sort of spat out after that. Well, I spat myself out really, and I landed in Tai Chi classes and I pursued that for a while, and that morphed into a Tai Chi mime ensemble, which became a really deep theatrical training, I suppose. It went on for about 5 years. It wasn't improvisational, really. Maybe it was. I pursued that for a while and I wanted to perform more, and I was attracted by a clown workshop. So I set off to Tasmania on a random sort of whim in a way, and that changed my life, blew me away. It was a clown workshop in the style of Lecoq. A woman from Sydney ran it, and I really fell in love with clown. And I found, I think, a way of being in the world that was different from what I'd had before. I found a different way of being with people that I really loved and probably really needed. So I took to that and I came back to Melbourne and just hit the streets and I used to go off to the National Gallery and just wander around in clown costume. It was amazing that they let me do that, because I think it was was so unusual, and they thought perhaps it was art. So I got away. I got away with a lot of things. It was mime clown, a sweet white-faced clown. I kept doing that, and gradually, I suppose I got better at it, and I got started to get gigs around that time. Street theatre became popular, and I got a lot of work in the streets, and I ended up doing all sorts of things, working as a clown, and I got involved with puppetry. So I had puppet shows. I used to do wandering puppet work, all sorts of things. I had a great gig over in South Melbourne, um, working puppets in a restaurant. That was fantastic. Half an hour of roving around with a large life-size puppet in a packed restaurant, interacting with people. So the improvisation came from necessity. In that environment, the best thing to do is to improvise. It's incredibly hard to build content or rehearse. You've really got to go in and see what works and develop that. Every situation was different, and I took to wandering. The wandering form of street theatre really suited me, where you can just move. If it's not happening, you just move to another person, and the crowd is moving past. You're moving with the crowd and to the crowd. So it's a very responsive state to be in, and I really loved it. It was really like scuba diving and throwing yourself into the water and swimming across the surface and looking down and seeing all the different weeds and rocks and fish and creatures appearing, and just floating in this world. And it was really a state of mind that I really love and loved and love. So that was I think that's the origins of improvisation for me. It grew and grew, and I did really big projects that living in the Urban Dream Capsule, living inside the shop windows, which was really just a sophisticated form of street theatre, protected from the elements with your own backdrop and lighting and music. You had control of those, and with an audience that could come and go. Similarly, highly responsive to the audience, and growing some content throughout the time, but content that was built in situ rather than rehearsed. There's a lot of stuff. Went overseas, won some awards, and started in the shop windows in a big way. I took to that environment, and that gradually built to the Dream Capsule, which toured the world for 10 years or so. And came back. Simultaneously, I developed with Katie Bowman, I developed a project called the Museum of Modern Oddities, which was a large performance installation. So we premiered it here in Melbourne. We rented an old hardware store that was full of hardware down in Collingwood, full of the most incredible hardware. And we cleaned it up. We installed a few things, not a lot, and changed the sign from hardware sign to museum, and opened it as a museum and offered ourselves as the guides and took people around. And well, I think we performed for like 2 months, continually within that environment, telling stories around the artifacts and gradually building consistent stories that were favorites, and developing new stories every day, taking the contributions of the audience in a big way and retelling those stories, working to small crowds, maybe one person, maybe 5 people, squeezing in, having a talk about nails or excavations or toilets. That was a wonderful premise for improvisation and styling. And that toured toured as well. We took that overseas, around Australia. Yeah, fun. We would use hard rubbish a lot, which was brilliant for our installations. We'd tour the hard rubbish collections, and when we're in Switzerland, they have wonderful secondhand shops, op shops. They're deluxe. They're op shops are deluxe. I think it's the Swiss are so careful about their possessions that when they move them on, they're practically brand new. So they'll be like 40 years old, but brand new, or really, really well looked after. Very high quality stuff, very unusual, beautiful. We did big installations with their stuff. Yeah. I don't know what more to say about that. I It's a form of improvisation, I suppose. It still had its seeds in street theatre. And then during COVID, I became very interested in uh, music, making electronic music, and voice, talking over music. And I got involved with Andrew Morris and yourself online, sharing improvisation practice. And that was something very different for me because it wasn't in the flow of life, but it was a kind of a static situation where you're just looking through a window and you're thrust back upon yourself very much. The content comes from yourself. And I've learned it. I mean, I think we've been going for like 3 or 4 years, maybe, which is a crazy amount of time, very, very consistently. 5 years, twice weekly generally. And I think I learned about pursuing my own content, telling my own stories from my own place. And I remember it being kind of really difficult at first and a huge resistance to talking about anything real. But gradually over time, I guess you keep pursuing things and things sort of melt and you move into that territory. So, yeah, I feel like following the example of yourself and Andrew and your histories, I've absorbed them and sort of incorporated them and amalgamated in my desire to work with sound and music and text and singing. So, and that's what I'm up to now. And I feel like it's become more of an exploration of what improvisation might be, if that makes sense.
Neil, thank you for that. You've said so much, but there's also so much that's been unsaid in that synopsis. Um, we've talked over the years in detail about improvisation, about your approach to improvisation. We've interviewed so many people, hence we've got sort of like a wealth of conversational knowledge and knowing between each other around this. But one thing that seems to be very central to your work is your relationship to the audience, your relationship to story, your relationship to communication, and to the audience's response. That seems to be very central. And I guess that's something that's very central to the very nature of theatre. And your performance, I think, is more theatrical than dance movement based, which many other improvisers sort of come from that background. So there's particularities and a uniqueness that you bring, that you have advanced, that you've developed, that you are developing, and that you're sort of mining the sort of details of your reflections and theatrical sort of knowledges in performance. I'd really like to talk to you a little more about, or like you to talk about, the relationship to audience and the reason why you might perform now, and I suppose the purpose of theatre and art making in your life at the moment?
Mm, mm. I think what I was sort of hearkening toward at the end, what I was talking about then, is I I make a distinction, and you could make a distinction between improvisation with an audience as a performance and improvisation as a process for yourself. I kind of can hold those separate. So in terms of performing, there's many ways you can go about performing, many ways, and one of them can be performing with improvisation, whether it's completely improvised or partially improvised, however that is. Improvisation in its purest form as a performance form tends to be a small audience who are tuned in and who really appreciate what's going on in that context. So I think of improvisation as a tool that can be used in performance. I also think of improvisation as a practice that one can do almost for oneself. So for me, in my practice, I will improvise at home on my own. And I can get a lot out of that. Uh, and well, the question might be, what do you get out of it? And it's that thing of I feel like I'm expanding myself. I'm playing with my consciousness. I'm opening myself up to realms of inquiry using different different forms or different tools or different scores to connect with myself. It's tricky. The language is very tricky. Um, I want to say something like reclaiming of the self or an opening of the self or connecting to the self, but it gives a kind of felt satisfaction. And I think that's a really, really important aspect of improvisation. So I see that more as a practice that might be like a breathing practice or a yoga practice or a Tai Chi practice. I feel like there's an aspect to improvisation which is sits sits close to that or alongside that. I've forgotten your question, Kevin. I don't know if that answers it.
Um, my question was to do with relationship with audience,
Oh yeah, okay.
but the your practice as practice, I know it's very integral to your life. I know it's something that you do each day, and I know that it's deeply meaningful, just as you've spoken of there. But we've often spoken about why
The
perform, to perform, and about the relationship with audience. And it's something you have
mm,
fairly strong opinions around and are fairly strongly purposed around. So that was my question before. And I'm wondering
mm.
if you want to go back to that.
I think I feel a very strong commitment to an audience. I feel like if people are paying to come and see you or have taken the trouble to come and see you, then you really owe them something. There's a commitment to sort of giving them a good time in whatever way you conceive of that as a good time. So it might be making them laugh, it might be moving them. There's a range of things. But I really feel if you've invited them, there's an obligation to create a significant experience for the audience. So I feel that. I yeah, maybe that's just a personal thing. I mean, you might go and say that that's part of how it should be, and for me, that's just how it is, and I think it's started because I grew my work up as a professional performer, so that if you needed to please the audience, otherwise you wouldn't get another gig. So it was more pragmatic in a way. I didn't come from an art an art place. It came from, people, punters would pay. So if they weren't pleased, they're voting with their feet. So I feel like that embedded in me. Whether that's a good thing or not, I don't know. I've softened around it in a kind of way because of the idea that a practice can be personally satisfying, and that's sort of enough. So our practice where we perform for each other, I'm less, oh, I'm not sure if that's true. It's still very important for me. So even when I'm performing online, I'm registering your nods and your glances, your laughs, your engagement. And if you're not engaged, I think there's an instant change in what I do. So I think it's just getting back to that responsiveness. I'm very, very responsive to audiences. And that's whether that's part of my nature or part of the history. That just seems to be how it is. And I'm comfortable with that. If, like I'm actually uncomfortable. If I can't see the audience, I'm very uncomfortable. Um, I want them to have a large part, a strong, significant say in what I'm doing. So, I know they're approving. I see it more as a collaboration. So that hence I'm uncomfortable in the straight theatre situation. I find that difficult because people don't have a big say in the theatre. They can smile, but basically they're kept in their seats and they're instructed when they can clap and when they can talk. It's a very lopsided situation, and uh, I feel uncomfortable in that because I'm not used to it. I much prefer when people have got a direct contribution. So a one-on-one conversation, I love. That's the greatest form of improvisation, really. The conversations, I think, are really underrated. Um, I think that's the future, actually, Kevin.
I, it makes absolute sense in the light of from where you started as a performer and the
Mm,
on the street, and the responsiveness was immediate, and it feels like that's been the sort of template in some ways for your whole career. It's so from that point of view, I'd like to acknowledge that as well, that how central that is in your work. I'm wondering, Neil, why improvisation now at this time in your life? Why you've sort of seemed to have you could have gone in many different directions over the last few years. You did some work with Patrick, and you
mm,
were pursuing other options, but sort of came back to improvisation. You you can act in a way. You can sing. You can play instruments. You've got a whole range of skills, of which you've incorporated in your improvisational practice form now. But I
mm.
think I want to ask you that question: why focus on improvisation at this time in your life when you could have pursued other areas? And why have you made it so very central?
Mm. Well, partly, it's a pragmatic thing. It's since COVID and even kind of before COVID, it was getting very hard to get the kind of work that I had. So yeah, I that was hard to get. It's hard to get work. Still hard to get work in or get the kind of work that I wanted to do. Put it that way. Um, but I think there's something about the discoveries around improvisation with you and Andrew and others online, and a little bit the Melbourne scene. It feels like there's a part of myself that needs filling out, um, and it's to do with and expressing. I think it's an expressing a deeper part of myself. I feel like that's what's going on, rather than presenting performances, which are in some ways fictions or larger creations, or the way I've done it has been less about me expressing myself. And I feel like the improvisation work is dipping into that. And I'm really interested in the explorations there. It feels very rich. I'm not quite sure why, Kevin, but it's just very rich. So it feels like there was maybe a thing to develop, and that maybe I'll turn that around and roll that around and feed that back into a performance with the larger world again.
Neil, I think I'm just reflecting on that question to you about why improvisation now, because when I look back, I guess your performances have always been improvised. On the street, in relationship to audiences, you've needed to respond on the go, and that's been absolutely inherent, I guess, forever. So I suppose improvisation has always been integral. It's just that you've probably taken it away a little at the moment from the context of audience work and use it as a more personal exploration. I think that's what you've often talked about now, how central it is to your sort of further becoming in life at the moment.
Mm,
One other question. You write, and you have written for quite a long time.
mm.
You've often asked guests, what's the relationship between writing for them and performing? So let me put that question to you because I know writing is really central. Writing and reading is very central to
Mm,
your life, Neil.
mm. I think for me, writing is about seeing what I think. So I see writing as a process of getting clear about things. So it's a kind of a forum for digestion, I think. Digestion of experiences, digestion of what I've read or thought. Originally, I'd I had the idea, and I've started doing more and more writing in the last half a dozen years, and I think it was I was hoping that writing would lead to greater articulation with speech. So I was hoping that my writing would create a fluency with speech and articulation in improvisation, and that I would be able to speak fluently. I'm not sure that that is the case. I think I've expanded my vocabulary a little bit, but I'm not sure it's improved my articulation. But what it does do, it functions in a similar way. It allows me to see what I'm thinking and make clear what my experiences are in a similar way that improvisation can do. So I think they're a similar process, and it's about self-reflection and turning things over. I think it's a practice to allow me to turn things over, keep the cogs moving, keep up a curiosity around what I'm experiencing through being, but also, very much through literature, creating conversation with books and then digesting that through my writing and bringing that out into improvisation, hopefully.
I'm thinking, Neil, that I think your whole life, in a way, has been an inquiry, starting with your original studies at university in philosophy. And
Mm,
it's as though you seem to be very reflexive in your life, that you'll act, you'll do, you'll reflect on that through various means, and writing is a sort of very particular means at the moment. But it strikes me that you've lived a life of inquiring. and continue to do so, and continue to do so in a very committed and in a very committed way that's so integral to your being in the world and making sense of the world.
Mm.
You think that's reasonable?
Yeah, I think that's true, Kevin. Yep. What can I say? Yes. Very perceptive. Spot on.
I'm not sure what more we need to add to that, except to say that
Mm.
I think you with that commitment to inquiring, that you have a certain levity in being in the world, but a certain seriousness of intent at the same time. And I've really grown to sort of enjoy that and love that about you. The ability to be
Mm.
very playful and yet at the same time very intent on living a meaningful existence and inquiring and further becoming.
Mm. 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 Yeah, good, Kevin. I think you can get ponderous and a little bit earnest and a little caught up in feeling like your thoughts are important or your point of view is important. And I think I think levity and humor, it sort of opens that up. So it keeps the edge of inquiry. Samuel Beckett, so serious, like seriously considered, serious, heavyweight thinker, and yet really slicing throughout all of his work is this just delightful, extraordinary humor. And I think, yeah, I think it's a well, humor is a good. Yeah, I think that's about the inquiry. I think humor comes with inquiry. I think humor gives an openness about things. It lets things sort of lets the steam off and creates a kind of companionship, I think. It's all okay. If you can laugh at yourself, I think it's a good thing. Yeah.
I'm thinking the place of clowning through your life from very early on, and the place of performance, the Urban Dream Capsule. I mean, there's that sort of, it was, I guess, full of life, full of humor, full of jest. So maybe there's been an important compensation right through your life with performance, with clowning, with humor, and with also a type of serious intent that resides within your being and in and around what you do. And I sort of want to confirm that and confirm the sort of
Mm.
the gift that I think that is for us that know you, and
Mm.
for us that sort
Yeah.
of spend time with you. The capacity to make light of serious business in the world, and at the same time acknowledge the serious business of being in the world and what it takes to make sense of it.
Mm. Mm. I think I've always been, I've been tracking this idea of what does it mean for better or worse? There's got to be more to it than this. How can we create meaning in our life? What are the things we should pursue? And I do think that a lot of the things I see, I'm kind of skeptical of. Um, so there definitely is that search for meaning, an existential meaning, social meaning. There's definitely that stream going on, and there is the stream of humor, which could be inherited from family. And mixing the two together. I think it's what can I say? It's interesting you talk about a compensation, humor as a compensation. I'm not sure what that means. It's a
I'm
question for you.
Yeah, well, I think I used it. I think I used it um, to try and speak about is how humor offsets what could well be the serious business of living. And I that sort of offsetting, it's a little bit too clean and clear, isn't it, in a way? Because I do think humor is inherent in you. You're a very humorous and funny person, and I think clowning is probably the something comes very natural to you because you've got that lightness and lightness in your being. So I want to be careful of just saying how humor compensates, but I think humor and the the deeper inquiries into being have both been inherent in your life, and I love the way they're entwined. I think that's what I'm saying, rather than sort of seeing it as a compensation.
Mm-mm.
One question, Neil. What books have you been reading of recent? You've often asked that of other person
Yeah.
we've interviewed.
Oh, look, I'm reading so many books, Kevin. I read several at once. Uh, Interestingly, I just dipped into uh, John Burge's a big writer for me. I just love John Berger, and I just dipped into one of his books that I hadn't read before, and I thought, oh, here we go. I'll give it a go, and oh, amazing! It's just amazing. Um, the guy. Is it the guy? Is it John Berger? I don't know. Is it the book? Is it something? But it just grabs me. It grabs my attention and it grabs my heart so quickly and so completely. It's extraordinary. It's just extraordinary. I only need to read a few pages and I'm like lying back gasping like a fish. Just my heart is so full. And so a little bit of John Berger. I've also been reading a book called Stolen Focus, which has also grabbed me in a very strong way. It's a non-fiction book about uh, the attention, how our attention is under assault, and all the things around that. Initially, I thought it was just going to be about the iPhone and the screens, but it's so much wider than that. It's a really fascinating non-fiction book. Also dipping into a Czech author who I really love and I have an interesting passion for as well. Bohumil Hrabal, could be pronounced like that, but he's a very poetic and sort of forgotten or not as well acknowledged in the Western world, I think, as he deserves to be. If people think of Czech writers, though, he won't be on the list, I don't think, in the West. It'll be sort of maybe Franz Kafka and Milan Kundera, but Bohumil's he's wonderful, and it's interesting because he has that same quality of talking about really important things, but in a very humorous, surrealistic, and light poetic touch. Uh, so I'm attracted to writers currently who have almost a political agenda, but led by the heart and very earthy, really earthy with heart, politics and humor. So, um, yeah.
Neil, when you say that, I just want to go back to the very nature of your performing, where you're often taking on characters, you're shifting voices, you're shifting perspectives as you perform, but the very nature of what you do seems to be an ongoing commentary about life, about the I guess I was going to say the stupidities of life, and I don't mean that in a negative way, but the sort of patterns that we take on societally that are not questioned. I think your
Mm.
performance is an endless commentary on the very nature of habits of being in the world and of blind spots. It's infused with humor, and yet at the same time, it really is a wonderful and ongoing provocation. I think it's also full of heart. So I think your synopsis of the books you're currently reading feels so akin to the very nature of your own performing and of being in the world. And your comment about John Berger, who you've often spoken about, is very touching. Um,
Mm.
would you like to say a
Yeah.
little bit more about John Berger for you? If that suits you
Mm.
at the moment, before we start to round off this podcast.
Yeah, very good, Kevin. Uh, I'm not inclined to, interestingly, because I feel like, people should just read, people should just go off and read John Berger, and it's the greatest. You'll just get it. What can I say about him? I think it's miraculous. Well, I think it's miraculous you can read a book and your heart can be so wrung out and you can be brought to tears into a state of like almost acute anguish. And that can all be written, that all done through the written, through an article, through a book, through sentences on paper. I find that remarkable. I Yeah. I think you're a better you talk better about me than I do, Kevin. So I love to hear your summations. I go, wow, you honestly have an incredible gift for being able to sort of see things and articulate those things. In fact, I've always admired that in you. I think I think when we get around to doing your podcast, be a very interesting thing to examine that skill and that ability.
I think I think
I
I think now, I think now we should come back to you, Neil. But what I was thinking when you were talking about John Berger, I realized that I am so often deeply moved with strong images and strong feelings with your performance. So I think it's a place where that's one of the gifts and provocations you bring to the world in your performance is generating worlds that we inhabit as an audience, generating worlds that are a commentary on being in the world, and generating worlds that sort of create options for consideration and optional ways of being in the world that are beyond our socialized acceptances. And you've got a very substantial capacity to question the world and to crack things open in ways where it gives both you and us opportunities to reconsider. And I can't think of a better definition for art making than that.
mm,
That
mm, mm,
to
mm,
to provide opportunities, I guess, for yourself as artists, but for us as witnesses to your art to be challenged and potentially transformed. So
mm. Yeah. Well, I think that's great. Uh, yeah. What lovely, Kevin. You've you've given me yeah, it's a substantial gift in presenting it in that way, I think, actually.
Neil, I'm wondering if there's just anything else that you'd like to add to what we've said, anything that sort of comes up for you right now as we're finishing this interview. Now's your last chance. Go ahead.
I've been thinking about this is the question. Where have I been in the performance realm where I've been like a pig in shit? And it's what would be the optimum situation? Where would I love to place myself so that I could create and express and expound? And it's something like sitting in a little elevated seat, like they have it maybe Kooyong for the umpire, a little seat like that with a microphone and uh, a speaker, and underneath the milling crowd just going about their business, and me just doing a commentary on this continual flow of people coming and going, something like that. And I thought about what that is in my nature that enjoys this uh, it's like a quick turnaround, an ability to just grab a snapshot of something and then jump to another snapshot. And I feel like there's something inherent in my consciousness that enjoys that. I have difficulty when it comes to structuring things in a bigger frame, like sitting back and going, put this here and put that there. That's a difficulty for me. So the actual art of writing and creating a piece of writing is a terrible, terrible challenge for me. I'll have the first fragment, but then I lose interest because I'll be on to another fragment, and the fragments don't necessarily sit together. So in part, in answer to your question about writing, it has been a training in trying to see how I could do something different rather than jump from fragment to fragment. So when you talk about this idea of providing a commentary upon life or the foibles of life, the ordinary life, I feel like that is something that I do naturally, and it's quite easy. It has a light sort of touch to it. It's just jumping from one thing to the next. It's like a little sampling, a little sitting back and sampling, and that suits my psyche. Why am I bringing all that up? So your comment was very perceptive when you said that is what I do, because it's sort of been disguised in a kind of way around shaping a performance out of it. But there is something really natural, a natural capacity. So I've been thinking about the idea of creating a frame for ourselves as art makers, pondering deeply and creating a frame for ourselves that allows us to naturally and easily express our natural capacities. And that's a worthy that's an interesting way of looking at how we might go about being effective in the world, creating a frame that announces our natural capacities. Full stop, nothing more.
Neil, thank you.
Mm.
Thank you. I guess
Yeah, well, thank you.
we've reached the point now of time-wise where we need to finish the podcast. What an opportunity it's been to, I guess, converse in ways that you and I often converse. And we have
Mm.
such an amenable way of being together and considering things, and to be able to make that a little more public in this sort of interview conversation has been such a gift. So thank you, Neil, for doing that today, and thank you for all that you bring and all that you brought to the podcasts and to the very nature of you being in the world.
Thank you, Kevin. See you soon.